pal Danny weighing in with a follow the money infographic that is intended to help us understand the hidden agenda behind the Soldiers Monument controversy, and for us to start to understand some of the larger agendas at play, the massive amount of money behind the push to remove it. I really want us to understand this is not a local grassroots organic step in an onward justice reckoning. That is not what is happening. We have the same elite institutions that have been social engineering our country from the start. And I want us to just understand this little piece of it. I'm working on a much more exhaustive infographic of all of the philanthropic foundations' influence here in Santa Fe, but I just want to start us off today with what is going on with the obelisk. So I'm going to start us off with a little video which was put out by 5050matic. Fair use, here we go.
This obelisk is about slavery. It's about an anti-slavery campaign, and it's about a failure to recognize how complicit the systems in New Mexico were with pro-slavery.
You see, this monument is built on contradictions. On one hand, honoring Union soldiers who fought pro-slavery Confederates, and on another, honoring a legislative assembly who were themselves slave owners. For example, there's
Jose Manuel Gallegos was a priest and a legislator and became the first Hispanic territorial delegate representing New Mexico. He had been captured by the Confederacy, was interrogated, and yet he held individuals in his household. Juana, Dolores, and Juliana Gallegos. Don't their stories deserve to be remembered every bit as Jose Manuel Gallegos?
Years ago, former New Mexico State historian Dr. Esteban Rayal Galvez created a database of enslaved and enslaving people as part of his dissertation studying indigenous slavery in the Southwest. Through his research, he revealed a widespread practice of indigenous slavery in New Mexico.
I was using family tree software because I wanted to see how people were related, both the enslaved and the enslavers. Everyone was involved at some level.
And so how is
now
it
that is key. That is really key. He says everyone is involved at some level. So this is a bit of a cherry-picked video, and two main really crucial pieces of information were left out of this video. One was that the Pueblo people, the indigenous people, also owned slaves at this time. It wasn't just the Hispanics or the white people. That was conveniently left out. And we're going to get to the biggest missing piece of this in a moment.
The Americans that came in changed the balance of power around slavery in this region.
There was a commission that was put together by a Wisconsin senator by the name of Doolittle to actually try to understand what are the causes of the Indian Wars. There are over 50 interviews that are done with people like Archbishop Lamy, Padre Martinez. The report reveals what everyone actually knew, that slavery was the cause of the Indian Wars.
One of those legislators was a man named Steck, an Indian agent who recognized the similarities between the enslavement of blacks in the South and the practice of indigenous slavery in the Southwest.
The Navajo is a powerful tribe and are noted for their ingenuity in industry. They will not, however, be controlled while their children are stolen, bought, and sold by our people. There is no law in the territory that legalizes a sale of Indians, yet it is done almost daily without an effort to stop it. People capturing and holding others, children being bought and sold, looks every bit as the slavery he knew that was happening throughout the United States. He tried to make it clear that this was hypocritical. I think the general public fails to fully understand the complicated nature of sites like this. But that's why we have historians, to actually pull back the layers and say, well, it's a little more complicated.
What they did at the end was a very standard propaganda technique. It's called appeal to authority, where we have Dr. Rael Galvez featured here on his Native Bound Unbound website telling us Well, the general public doesn't understand because the general public is probably too stupid, but luckily there are experts like me to tell you how you're supposed to think about it. What I want us to go into as we look deeper into Dr. Rael Galvez's Native Bound Unbound project, two things. So it centers the lives and histories of enslaved indigenous people of the Americas. The purpose of this organization is to put together databases of indigenous slaves. But here's the biggest piece that 5050matic left out of their video. They forgot to let the public know that Native Bound Unbound and Dr. Rael Galvez is sponsored by both the Mellon Foundation and School for Advanced Research. And I'm going to return to our infographic because it's very, very, very important. Native Bound Unbound was given $1.5 million from the Mellon Foundation, which was funneled through School for Advanced Research. The $1.5 million was just a drop in the bucket because the Mellon Foundation's monument project is a $500 million initiative. Let's look deeper into this initiative. So the Monuments Project was started in 2020, aimed at transforming the nation's commemorative landscape. What does it do? Supports reparative community-driven actions around existing monuments, including contextualization, relocation, removal, and community visioning and engagement for sites of removed or relocated monuments. It has been positioned as a signature strategic initiative under President Elizabeth Alexander. Now, it's important to recognize that Elizabeth Alexander, who is president of the Mellon Foundation, and pictured right here in the infographic, came from Ford Foundation. She became president in 2018, and then in 2020, she launched the $500 million monument project as their signature initiative. Now, let's look at some critiques. There are many, many, many critiques about this, but just to give us a really quick overview, the Mellon Foundation's Monuments Project is totalitarian in its proposed scope and radical vision, something utterly in conflict with American pluralism and preference for localism, a brazen effort to wrest control away from communities as to the state of their own public spaces. The construction of new monuments is not the focus of this endeavor. The first grant announced from the $250 million, so that was doubled very soon after it was launched, is one of $4 million for a national monuments audit to be accompanied by a concurrent database of reported protest activities tied to monuments. An additional $1 million is allocated for 10 Monument Lab field offices that will reimagine monuments, including the relocation or rethinking of existing monuments. Now, I just want us to note that this $500 million is not going to indigenous people or reservations or pueblos. It's going to the removal of monuments. The product of centuries of accretion is to be audited by teams of activists equipped with a spectacularly large budget for what is euphemistically called relocation, but which generally means disappearance. It is clear that this sort of activity is what the Mellon Grant is designed to support. It was one of 5 foundations, we'll go into those in a moment, contributing to the disappearance of 4 monuments in New Orleans. Now, I think this is very important to keep in mind that the Mellon Foundation is responsible for the disappearance of monuments in New Orleans, keeping in mind 3 Sisters did a mural project in New Orleans, and that the remains of the Kate Carson obelisk magically disappeared over the past couple months, which is kind of a telltale sign of the monument project funded by Mellon Foundation in action. The other foundations working in concert are Ford, Rockefeller, and Kellogg. Now, all of these foundations also fund quite a lot of the divide and conquer antics happening here in Santa Fe. And I want to bring our attention to Ford Foundation, remembering that Ms. Alexander came from Ford Foundation. And I just want us to have this in mind, given what a huge funder Ford Foundation is of a lot of social justice in Santa Fe and all over the country. So the Ford Foundation was founded in 1936, And at the height of the Cold War, the Ford Foundation was involved in several covert operations with the CIA. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented in Wikipedia. From 1958 to 1965, the foundation's chairman was John McCloy, who in 1942 had founded the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, which ultimately became the Central Intelligence Agency. So it's very well established, the Ford Foundation's collaboration with American intelligence agencies, which is why I want us to keep this in mind in remembering that Ms. Alexander came from Ford Foundation to Mellon Foundation before founding the Monument Project there. Now, I just want to get into a few more critiques. In other words, from their perspective, since memorials have always changed, we are justified in removing our monuments, ultimately transforming their physical context and altering the ways that people are able to engage with them. This really seems to be what is happening with the Soldiers Monument here in Santa Fe. The audit lists the individuals most often depicted in our monuments, criticizing the fact that the list is dominated by white, male, and wealthy figures and contains no self-identified LGBTQ plus people. I just want us to really understand what is happening here in Santa Fe. This is not grassroots. This is $500 million going to the eradication of monuments, 1.5 million going to School for Advanced Research, and from there going to Native Bound Unbound, which is seeing the Soldiers Monument through the lens of Indigenous slavery. Now, I want to give us another little visual reference. These are what I call sexism goggles. And who we have right here, she's an anti-sexist activist. Now, given that her mission is to call out and to stamp out sexism, she necessarily has to perceive the world through sexism goggles to be able to pinpoint instances of sexism to call out, given that's her mission. Similarly, we would imagine that Dr. Rael Galvez is likely interpreting the world through Indigenous slavery goggles, given that he was gifted $1.5 million from the Mellon Foundation through School for Advanced Research to document such things. So it's quite possible that his vision is a bit skewed. I mentioned 505 Omatic forgot to mention his funding and the connection to the Monument Project, which is dead set on removing monuments. We can also see School for Advanced Research, which receives funding from Mayor Alan Weber, who went on record calling this monument a sign of systemic racism. This whole funding pipeline wants the monument removed, but it's not coming from the people of Santa Fe. It's coming from these elite billionaires who are telling us we have to erase our history because it's going to make it so much easier for them to create a whole new narrative for us to embrace. I just wanted us to get an understanding of where this controversy around the monument is coming from. Every entity here wants the monument gone. Nothing organic, nothing grassroots, nothing that isn't contrived by the billionaire elites who have always social engineered this country and continue to under the guise of simple little grassroots activism, which it totally is not.